Welcome everyone to the Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting on this, goodness, what day is it? Tuesday, September 20th, 4 p.m. Pardon me for that. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and let's do a roll call.
Chair Short.
I am here.
Commissioner Greeno.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
Commissioner Tompkins.
Here.
Very good. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time, we will entertain any public comment. There is no public in the virtual room, and there is no public in the room with us today. So we will dispose of public comment and move on to our consent agenda, which comprises of 3 items. They are approve the minutes of regular session, Tuesday, the 16th of August, 2022. Approve the payment claim number 9350 to North Coast Laboratories Limited in the amount of $6,078 for water sample analysis and reporting under invoice number 166391. And the last one is approve the budget transfer for fiscal year 2022-23 in the amount of $64,206.
I just have a question on what the professional services was that for?
I also had that question. Thank you.
I'm sorry, that's for North Coast Laboratories, for them analyzing the water samples.
So that's not the 6,000, that is the...
That is the 6,000. Additionally, under that invoice, they do some electronic reporting for us. So they compile reports that are required in a certain format for, it's called GeoTracker, and so that's the reporting that was included there.
So the HD33, that's what I was asking about, Ted.
Oh, the HD33, that's not on the consent agenda.
Yeah, it has to do with that item. It's in that budget transfer.
For 64,000.
The 64,000 is repopulating a grant line.
Okay.
So that was money that was left over last year in the HD33 grant, and then that money is then, once we figure out what the final balance of the remaining funds are, then we repopulate those into the grant lines.
Great, that's the only question I had. With that, I will move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second, and a couple more people came in the room. Do we have any public comment on this item? Thank you. No, so I'll close the public comment, excuse me, and if you would poll the vote.
Commissioner Tompkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey.
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith. Yes. Chair Short.
Yes, thank you for that. We'll move on to the director's reports. And
All right.
Ted, if you would
Yeah.
kick that off.
Thank you, Chair Short. So I'll start with community events. If we could pull up the PowerPoint. I have a few pictures to show y'all. Okay, so first, this last Saturday we had the annual beach cleanup, and nearly 50 volunteers organized by the Smith River Alliance near South Beach and the Talo-Adeni Nation and Talo-Din Stewards in the north. And included in the volunteers was Supervisor Maston. We collected 1,220 pounds of metal and 5,280 pounds of trash, so very good event, and we appreciate all the participants. Thank you for adopting the consent agenda. Let's see, moving on. So some of these items will be addressed elsewhere in the agenda. So one of the things that we talked about last meeting, and we will be talking about this meeting, is the status of landfill repairs. But one thing that is not covered in this agenda, so I'll cover it now, is the legislative update. It was a banner year in terms of solid waste and recycling legislation, and I'm going to be covering just some of those bills, and it's important to recognize that the legislature has done a lot in terms of greenhouse gas concerns and things like that. So a lot of the laws that were passed have to do with fuel and fuel extraction and processing. I'm not covering those bills because that's not generally what we do. But I will be addressing the things related to solid waste and recycling and the programs that we do run. So here are some of the highlights. Big one was SB 54. That creates an extended producer responsibility program for printed paper and plastic packaging and sets recycling rates and reduction targets. That's already been signed into law. A lot of these laws, though, what happens is they get signed into law, and then the agency responsible for overseeing the implementation drafts up regulations, which then have their own approval process. And then once the regulations have been adopted, then everybody has to start towing the line. So sometimes, even though these laws have been passed and signed into law, it'll take a while before we start seeing those effects. So, wine and distilled spirit bottles have been added to the bottle bill. This literally has been discussed for at least 25 years. It's about, everybody looks at it and says, well, this is glass. Shouldn't that go in the recycling bin? Shouldn't I be able to get a nickel back? And now the answer is yes. Two big bills that passed are AB 2440 and SB 1215. They both address batteries. A lot of the concerns that were expressed this season include concerns about fires and ways that things that are discarded in the waste stream can become the source of fires. And batteries, particularly lithium-ion batteries, are definitely at the top of that list. We're seeing more and more handheld electric rechargeable devices, more and more embedded batteries in products, and while lithium-ion batteries are very good at holding a charge, what happens is if you break those batteries, they can discharge immediately and then cause a fire hazard. So pretty much anywhere where you have compaction or metal scraping against metal, if there's a chance a battery couldn't be in there, then there's a chance of a fire too. And so I'm really happy about it. AB 2440, which establishes an EPR program for most separate batteries, and SB 1215 addresses battery embedded products and incorporates them into our current e-waste program. So hopefully in the years ahead we'll be able to manage those even better. But currently, I'll remind everybody that we do take household batteries. Delaware County Transfer Station just tape one end of each battery. We also take car batteries every day. So other bills that were passed include AB 661, which updates the state agency Buy Recycled campaign. And SB 1256 also is sitting on the governor's desk awaiting signature, and that would ban the sale of single-use 1-pound propane containers starting in 2028. Refillable propane containers are suitable and preferred replacements, and we'll be talking shortly about some of the grants programs we've been implemented to try to promote those alternatives. AB 1985 delays some of the enforcement penalties for organic waste procurement targets under SB 1383. Currently, we are looking at food rescue and procurement as part of our early things that we need to do, but some of those procurement targets are deferred for our rural areas. But this is an indication that the legislature generally expects municipalities to work towards SB 1383 goals, but they recognize that if they're a little too ambitious, they'll step back. So I think we're on a good course, and it's a good conversation between the local agencies and the legislature at this point. The last bill I'll cover is AB 1757, and this was not really on the list of most of the solid waste bills, but I think it's relevant to us in that SB 1383 calls for changing the way we manage organic materials and pulling those materials out of streams that would normally be going to the landfill. But what it also does is it tries to address in a comprehensive fashion the ways that we produce and potentially sequester greenhouse gases. And so this is an area that I think Del Norte County can really be of help to the state's goals, in that the Natural Resource Agency by 2024 is to set an ambitious range of targets for natural carbon sequestration and for nature-based climate solutions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the 2030, 2038, and 2045 targets. So Bottom line is, we've talked about this before, but a single application of a 1/4 inch of compost on degraded rangelands will continue to sequester carbon on those lands for the next 30 years. So that's a great application of the compost that we'll be producing through these organics diversion programs, and Del Norte County has a lot of rangeland that could potentially receive those materials and be part of the state's efforts to sequester that carbon. So we're looking to that bill and the programs that come out of it as ways that we might be able to contribute towards those efforts. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the legislative bits, or I can just move on to the rest of the director's report.
Any questions? Doesn't appear to be any questions. Go ahead,
Okay,
let's move
moving on. This is also an item we'll be discussing later in the meeting. Another event that we have coming up is the November 5th. We will have an expired marine flare collection event. I very much appreciate Kira Seymour and the California Product Stewardship Council who helped coordinate this event, but that's coming up pretty soon from 10 to 2. This is the time to bring in your expired marine flares. So if you've got a boat, if you've got flares, you've got somewhere in maybe your boat shack out back, please bring them in. There hasn't been easy disposal, and for some attendees will actually receive free emergency replacement signals, because that's part of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to promote these less toxic, reusable emergency signaling devices. We think they're a better alternative. They are a little bit more expensive, but when an emergency happens, at least you don't have to worry about whether or not that flare is going to misfire and maybe melt your life raft. So that event's coming up. But part of the reason, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question on that. Did we figure out where we were going to be sending those flares? Are they?
We've contracted with Clean Harbors to,
Okay.
they will be taking them to, I believe, they're taking them to the very next event, which will be in the Bay Area, as they are sharing the cost for this, and then they are all going together to a place of incineration.
Okay, a disposal company somewhere.
Yeah, and they go to, they have like 3 different options of where they can go, so it does depend on where they're leaving from, so.
Okay, excellent, because I know in the past we'd had a discussion of how difficult it is to get rid of them. So.
Absolutely.
Exactly, which is why they're trying to do a milk run, and we really appreciate the partnerships of marinas throughout the state who are really facing the same challenge.
Yeah, hopefully we can get the word out to those commercial fishermen and all those fishermen that have those stacked up in their
Absolutely.
sheds at home, or who knows where they've been storing
We're
them.
pushing it. We're even sending every single boat owner, they're getting by mail postcards and stuff. So.
Ah, beautiful.
Okay.
Great job. Thank you.
Okay. Part of the reason I mentioned that is that was part of the HD 33 grant, which is continuing and it has been extended. But we just got an announcement that CalRecycle has awarded us another $100,000 to essentially expand on these programs and continue those efforts. Once again, we'll be partnering with the California Product Stewardship Council, and the grant activities will include promotion of reusable, less toxic marine signals, collection of marine flares for proper disposal, and exchange events to promote refillable 1-pound propane containers. And actually, towards that end, I'll also, I can mention that due to the efforts of California Product Stewardship Council and Kira, ACE is now going to be soon carrying refillable propane containers. So more locations where you can get those and you can tell your camping friends. Another announcement coming up this Saturday, September 24th from 9 to 2 is our annual Household Hazardous Waste Collection event. So this is the one day when we can take pesticides, herbicides, solvents, poisons, contaminated oils and fuels like you might get if you blow a head gasket, makeup, photographic chemicals, lamp ballasts, non-empty aerosol containers. If you think you might have materials that would most appropriately come to the Hazardous Waste Day, you can give us a call at 465-1100. But I do like to remind everybody that the most common household hazardous waste we do take every day. So those include used motor oil, antifreeze, batteries, car batteries, household fluorescent bulbs, non-aerosol latex and enamel paints, stains, and water treatments, and household fats, oils, and greases. and home-generated sharps. So quite the list of container materials that we take every day, but for those things that have a skull and crossbones, say danger, toxic, this is the day to bring all of those other things. And some people have mentioned, for instance, Seventh-day Adventists have called us and said, well, you know, we're concerned because you're having this day on Saturday, and that's the day of our Sabbath. And so I do open the door to, if there are households, you can combine households, it's totally okay. Your neighbor needs to have those materials go, you can combine the households. Just let us know as you're coming in how many households are coming in, and we'll log you accordingly, but that's totally fine. Be happy to answer any questions on that.
Any questions? All right, Ted, let's keep
Okay,
going.
moving on. All right, and the other things will be covered in the general meeting. I guess I will mention a few things that did happen. One is on September 9th, staff encountered a large bear at the Klamath Transfer Station, which was likely attracted to the fish heads and carcasses that are currently being disposed this season. The bear moved off without incident, but staff have all been retrained on the proper use of pepper spray as a bear deterrent during our most recent staff safety meeting. Let's see. We are also completing the organics recovery reporting, and this has been sort of a trial run of our partnership with the city and the county, because as we've discussed on SB 1383, some of our role as the Solid Waste Authority, we can't meet all of the procurement requirements under this. For instance, we do not set how much compost the Parks Department uses and where it uses it. So we rely on the county and the city to bring us those reports, and then we're going to be reporting to the state on behalf of everybody. So I appreciate the efforts of Randy Hooper from the county and Martha Rice from the city in getting us that information. But we'll be submitting that before the end of the month. So I'll move on to the financial reports.
Can I get you to back up a little bit?
Sure.
And talk about the vandalism and worker safety concerns that you're having?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to brush over that. I think that's important to talk about.
Absolutely. I was going to cover a little bit of that in the landfill repairs, but
Okay.
essentially worker safety is a concern at all of our facilities. And sometimes the hazards are animals, sometimes the hazards are people. But out at the landfill, for instance, the 2 no trespassing signs that we installed, 2 out of 3 have now been stolen. When our staff were out there collecting water samples, they discovered that 2 wells have been significantly damaged and will require repair. And there were gunshots being fired on the southern end of the landfill property. So all of these things are absolutely safety and vandalism concerns, and they're costs to this agency. So our problems at the landfill have not gone away in terms of the personnel risks, and animal problems are seasonal. But it is also relevant for our SB 1383 discussions because, for instance, there are jurisdictions in the state that are above 4,500 feet that are allowed exemptions from collecting food waste because there are bears at 4,500 feet. Well, we just had a bear incident at the Klamath Transfer Station, which is close to, what, maybe 20 feet above sea level?
If that, right?
So for some reason, our bears are just not trained to wear the altimeters or stop at the elevation signs. I don't know. But in any case, it's an ongoing issue, and it will be part of our discussion with Cal Recycle.
Okay, and yeah, so, and you're going to meet with the sheriff about these incidents? You
We're
haven't
trying
yet?
to. I've tried to reach out to the sheriff through the person who makes his appointments, and they've heard our concerns, and we have yet to have a meeting.
Okay, I'll see what I can do to help facilitate that.
I would welcome that. Because it is an ongoing concern, it's a real concern, and I know the sheriff's juggling a lot of things and they're short-staffed, but every single time our staff go out there, I'm concerned about it. I want the sheriff to know. I want to be able to communicate that.
Absolutely.
I have Garrett's personal email. I have Garrett's personal email, perhaps.
I'll take that.
What about California Fish and Game?
We're working with them.
Aware of the problem too?
They very much are, and in fact, there's a very developed duck blind adjacent to the landfill property, and they've been asking us about whether or not they can access and get across and get some equipment in there to remove that, because they're...
So the gunshots too, south of the landfill, I would think that they would have more free time than the sheriff's office would.
Everybody's tapped thin, is the general impression I get. But we always try to report these things, and I appreciate the
Well,
suggestion.
I feel like at the very least, and I know I'm butting in here, but I think at the very least, there needs to be a written report, an incident report. There needs to be documentation that these things are happening, and so that when the time comes that we have to make some tough decisions upon additional staffing or, other protective measures, that they have all been documented so that we can make that decision thoughtfully. So that's why I understand everybody is stretched thin, but I do believe it's extremely important to have these things documented. And as citizens of this community, that should be occurring. So again, I wanted to throw my 2 cents in there.
Thank you.
So Ted, what would you think about possibly trying to arrange a meeting between 2 of us, sheriff's representative, maybe an undersheriff, or who else, and like Mr. Smith says, a member of the California Fish and Wildlife.
Happy to
Law
do that.
Enforcement. Realize it's a special meeting, but if you could arrange that, I'm sure that I would
Okay,
love to jump in.
we'll follow up with an email chain, and we'll try to set that up.
I think that'd be good, because we've had plenty of trouble out there, and it needs to be addressed.
And I really appreciate the board's wanting to participate in the conversation, because I think when they hear that there are several elected officials who are interested in participating in the meeting, we might get a meeting more promptly.
Well, safety should be our highest concern for our employees.
It
and
almost
is.
seems like the neighbors
So-
know when our personnel are out there, so.
Well, they do. And to be fair, anybody who has somebody walking around the border of their property would be concerned. That's not surprising at all to me.
So good. Hopefully we can get that set up in the near future, and maybe get some possible solutions decided upon.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to the financial reports?
Absolutely.
Okay. Looking at our cash balance, we have $1,784,323 in the bank, plus $198,000 for the last month's rent, so to speak. That's just a snapshot of what our accounts look like. Looking at our accounts receivable summary, you can see that there's only one account that's on hold that's over 90 days past due, thanks to good work of Kathy Brewer. Looking at claims approved by director, once again, our largest expense is to Hambro Waste Solutions Group for the good services they provide at the Delaware County Transfer Station, and our second largest expense is for the debit and credit card machines. I feel like I should note that it was hovering around $6,000 a month for our regular credit debit card charges, and now it's gone up to about $8,000. So the proportion of folks using cards is increasing, and it's important to recognize that those transactions are more expensive. I just came back from an electrician who, when I paid with a credit card, he charged me extra 3.5%, because that's what the card costs to run. And the same thing is true for us as well. Every time we run a card, we have to take a portion of the fees that we're receiving and pay it to the credit card company. So just acknowledging that reality, and also noting that it is becoming a larger part of our customer base.
We see it happen personally, I see it happen more and more. And is that something that we could not work out as Delaware Solid Waste, is adding that percentage?
We talked about it. I think it's really difficult to work out in practice, because we're, as a public agency, we have one rate. We don't have, it would be very impractical to have the 30-plus different categories of charges have 2 separate rates for each of them, the one that you charge for a credit card and the one that you charge if you're paying cash. So that becomes very problematic just in terms of administering the rates.
I don't know if it'd be, we see it on gas rates, cash versus credit. And I don't know if there's an algorithm that the credit card companies
I
would
could
use
check
to
with
just
legal counsel,
a flat,
but but I believe it's a
Whatever the
public
rate is.
agency thing, mostly, because I think the companies we can think of that do these extra charges for the credit cards, they're all private companies. I'm not aware of a single public entity that does that. But if you know of one, I'd be happy to talk to them.
The only extra charge I've seen is at a gas station, for, cash versus card, but anywhere else, I've never seen a charge for using your debit card.
yeah, I've seen them in other states. I've seen them in restaurants and some variety stores.
Here in
I've
Delaware
seen-
County?
No, in other states. I've seen them around the United States where they charge an extra fee. And I don't know, maybe legal could weigh in on it. It just seems completely fair if we're getting charged that whatever percentage rate it is. It just seems like a one blanket statement, this is
A
cash.
percentage surcharge.
And there's a percentage more for using a card.
I'll inquire about that, but to reassure everybody, the soonest we would ever consider that would be at the time of our annual rates, so nothing would
Yeah.
possibly happen until next July at the earliest.
Yeah,
So
and
that's plenty of lead time for you to get it figured out, right, Chad?
Thank you for that.
And I'm hearing you, but I think the bigger focus needs to be on the credit card companies and, having them reduce that percentage fee. So, I'm hearing you, and I think that I can understand that we want to save that money, that 3%. I just don't know that we're the entity to take that on. But that just, again, just shooting from the hip here, I think that it's convenient for credit cards. We've got to be able to offer it. Do we then just give a cash discount? If you pay cash, you get a discount. I don't know, but I think that there's a much larger discussion than just our solid waste management on that 3%.
And dovetailing off of that, I've seen some advertisements that talk about, are you paying credit card fees for use of credit cards? Well, you need to look at this. And I truly have not looked at them, but obviously there is options out there, so maybe we could look into them. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
I can explore what our options might be in that regard.
That would be great. Thank you, Ted.
Continuing on with the financials, last month looked pretty good. As the summer months tend to be busier, certainly August was the same. And so our revenues for August came in about $20,890 ahead of budget. And our revenues from the franchise fees came in about $66,543 ahead of budget. So at this point in time, we are $68,892 ahead of budget, meaning that our income is coming in faster than we projected. But it always comes in at a faster pace during the summer months compared to the winter months. So this is in line with expectations. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. I do have one. Back to our balance sheet. With the idea that if we do have, how do you say it, excess revenue or excess cash, more than is expected, my first thought would be to pay down debt as we would deem possible. So looking at our balance sheet comes together at the same number, I'm wondering what the values are that represent in liabilities and fund equity, our revenue and expenditures there at the end. What do those numbers represent? The fund balance, investment in capital assets, revenue, expenditure, what do those represent, and is there a possibility that we could pay down debt faster than we are currently?
Those are all very good questions, and I appreciate them. The short answer is that all of these are funds that are tracked by the Del Norte County Auditor's Office. And they're the ones, these are, all of our revenues and liabilities are consolidated into these accounts. And those accounts often contain several different accounts on our actual authority budget, but they're consolidated into fewer accounts for the auditor's office to track. In terms of paying down debts, in general, this may be the year that the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority finally emerges into the black. We won't know until we actually get the finished audit that gives a summary of where we're at, because right now the cash balance doesn't really tell you exactly where you're at, just because it's a cash accounting versus accrual accounting, right? So if you're familiar with those two differences, it's like the difference between looking at what your fund balance is in your checkbook versus looking at how many bills you have already incurred that are coming, that you know that are there, that might change what you think of as your wealth, right? And so in terms of paying down debt, the authority does that on a regular basis. So that we do that by paying the county for the loan for the transfer station. We do that by setting aside revenues for maintenance of the landfill. And those liabilities that we've talked about before and how those are calculated, we need to have assets to balance those liabilities. So thus far, for my entire career working for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, this agency has been in the red, meaning that we've had the debts of the landfill, debts of the transfer station, and we've been accumulating revenues to try to slowly dig our way out of that debt. In addition, this agency, as a joint powers authority, accumulates depreciation. So depreciation is an actual cash expense, about $90,000 a year, which means that at the end of that, each fiscal year, we have to have $90,000 that just goes into the fund balance. So but the concept of that is that money that should be available to rebuild the facility or to repair the facility once it ends its useful life. So that's why the depreciation is the cash balance. But the bottom line is that those are some of our major debts, and then the other major debts are associated with our post-employment benefits liabilities. And I have another report on that coming up later in the agenda. So it's a very timely question, but the bottom line is that we have been paying down our debts, and this may be the year when we finally emerge into the black, because that's how the projections have been looking. So it's within the next 3 years, I would project, but it may be this year.
Okay,
So-
yeah, I did
and-
not mean to infer that we hadn't been paying our debts. I was just,
Well, and one of the other things too, that if I understand this correctly, is that right now we're getting over budget, we're bringing, but in the winter months, that goes backwards.
That's true.
And so we have to make sure that we're prepared for both. Am I
Yes,
that is
getting
correct.
that
I
right?
understand. Our, budget to actuals during the summer months will reflect something that's maybe not, conducive with the average numbers. But, yeah, I was just, it seemed to me like even though I'm not the most adept at reading this report, seemed like we may have had some more than anticipated assets to be paying down debt faster than is planned. I mean, I realize we were paying down debt as scheduled, and we're doing that well, but I was just, that was the reasoning of my question is, if we were able, then I would advocate for that, so.
I agree.
If we are, maybe after we finish this debt payment, then we can look at doing other things, but I just wanted to ask that question. So, Mr. Greeno.
I just wanted to echo the chair's sentiment. I appreciate you bringing that up, Chair. I think that we should be paying down debt when we can, as long as the agency has the money to continue operating, so.
Very good.
All right.
Okay.
That concludes the director's report
Thank you for that,
and the
sir.
financials.
Okay. Moving on to, double check I'm in the right place, landfill post-closure, item 3.1.
Yeah, I am delighted by the progress that Kira and Michael and DDR have done at the landfill, and I'm very pleased to say that all erosion areas have been repaired. The top deck and the perimeter road have now been mowed. The herringbone drainage channels have been weed whacked. DDR, Dave Mason and his company did the weed whacking at prevailing wages, so that's a significant bill that we'll be seeing next month. And today, the local enforcement agent for Cal Recycle, the Del Norte County Environmental Health Inspectors, did not indicate any areas in violation at this point. So thanks to Kira's good shepherding of those efforts, we are now out of violation. And as we noted before, the 2 no trespassing signs have been stolen. And then I should also note that when our staff went out there to do the first round of water sampling, there was a personnel shooting target mounted to the interior gate at the landfill with a little shot right through the head. I believe they were trying to communicate something to our staff, and it's not very nice.
It's pretty easy to come to that conclusion, I believe.
That's serious.
That seems like
Very
a threat
serious.
to me. Did we
That's
let
very
law enforcement
serious.
know about that?
I call law enforcement, I let them know, I try to get a meeting.
And no,
Maybe we need to think about
no one showed up?
hazardous duty pay. I don't know.
That's worth calling 911 for.
Yeah, did no one show up and take a report?
I called it in.
Okay.
Will you give me the date that you made that call? That would be
Sure.
helpful. Thank you.
That's serious.
Okay, we will, talk
Do you need
about-
that right now?
Well, you can just get it to me.
Okay, yeah, I'll send that to you in the email.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ward.
Bottom line is the repairs have been affected. They were done on as quickly as we could get them done, and so they're more expensive than they would have otherwise been, but that's part of the nature of the work to be done.
Can I ask a quick question? I know that we've been using DDR, but did we put that out for an RFP?
Absolutely.
Okay, we did in the past, and that was who was selected.
And to be honest, we'll talk about this further at subsequent meetings, but it's challenging.
Sure.
Because as a maintenance activity on a public facility, our legal counsel is advised that these are public works, and so they need to be paid at prevailing wage.
Oh, I don't have a problem with the prevailing wage. The trespassing signs from previous that were installed, so it's that type of oversight I'd like to see more of. And like I said, if we're not happy, right, we could put this out for another RFP and try and get more competitive.
And that's why I mentioned the prevailing wage issue, because while the people who do the work love prevailing wage work because they actually get paid pretty well, the contractors who oversee that don't make very much money.
Yeah.
And so consequently, there aren't as many bidders for prevailing wage work because it's essentially a high overhead job with a lower profit margin.
Can I ask a question about the gate?
Sure.
Has there been a thought of game cameras or anything at that gate?
Absolutely.
Why aren't they there?
We're still working on it. They're not there yet.
Okay, what's the process of getting them there?
Working with our contractor, identifying the right camera and the right circumstance and what's most cost effective for whether or not it's going to be an online thing or whether we have to swap out SD cards, all those sorts of considerations.
Okay. Seems a little simpler to me than that, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I agree with you. We are working on these things, but things don't happen immediately.
Okay. Oh, well, I was just curious.
No, it's a great question.
And vandalism is an ongoing issue.
Okay, so, are we finished with item 3.1 then?
Yes, I think so.
All right. Working toward transfer stations, discussion and possible action regarding plans for the annual household hazardous waste collection event.
So this is coming up this Saturday from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. This is the one day to bring your materials that we don't take every day. I kind of covered this already. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Circus is coming to town.
Very good.
So
Okay.
it's exciting.
Well, and,
I
and
go
people,
online,
people
yeah.
love free, and they like this
I
event.
love free.
And, but it is not a free dump day, it's just free for these household hazardous materials, and it is for Del Norte County residents. So those of you who are listening from Brookings, this is not a free service for you.
I do have to say, Commissioner Insker looks very excited about the event in this picture.
That's true.
Is that him?
It is him.
It is him.
We roped him in for an ad earlier.
That's awesome. Okay, skipping past item 5, moving on to 6.
Yep.
General Solid Waste Authority matters.
Okay, this is the Clean California event. So we've had bulky item dump days in Klamath and Gasky and Smith River currently, and we've now been paid for all of those events by Caltrans, and so we are now in the process of trying to plan for a similar event in Crescent City. So while we haven't specified a date yet, we're regularly having discussions with them about how it should all work. So this is our current vision for how we think it's going to work. We'll hold on a Saturday between 9 and 1, sometime possibly in November, but once there's enough lead time to be able to get the word out. And we found that social media is probably the #1 way that people find out about these things. So we want to make time to allow those social media spots to take effect. Customers with mattresses will likely be directed to Humboldt Moving and Storage, which does take mattresses from 9 to 1 on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And so I've already called them and said, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. But since they're already taking them under the Bye-Bye Mattress program, under the Mattress Recycling Council, we figured why set up separately at the transfer station, just in the advertising, let people know, if you've got mattresses, here's where you go, and for all the other bulky items, come to the transfer station. So we're hoping Caltrans will supply 2 tire trailers, and we would mount those in the loading docks at the transfer station.
Mr. Ward,
Yes.
if I could back up to the mattresses. In the board report, it says mattresses or box springs.
Yes.
And I've used Humboldt Moving and Storage cleaning up a blighted property that we acquired. I don't know why, but it seems like they only take mattresses. Do they take box springs
They
as
do
well?
take mattresses and box springs.
Okay, I wanted to make that.
But not,
clear.
I think futons are now in there, but the pure foam ones I don't think are. So if you're not sure whether or not your mattress would be accepted, call them. Also, soiled mattresses are not accepted through that program. So if you had somebody die on a mattress and it's got bodily fluids on it and things like that, that would not be for recycling. You should just go ahead and dispose
Yeah,
of that.
I understand. I just wanted to be sure and send a clearer message to those folks that are showing up with a box spring and a mattress. I wasn't aware that box springs were allowed, so I
And
didn't
they
want
take up
there
to
be that
6
confusion.
units. That was the other reason why we thought it would be good to direct people there, is that when they're open during the 9 to 1 hours, they'll take 6 units per customer. So up to 6 mattresses and box springs.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So during the day of the bulky item dump day at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, our vision is we would have a separate line for the participants of the bulky item dump day. They'd be handed some kind of identifying card, directed to unload at specific locations, and then exit without weighing and returning the card. And we would be open for regular brush and trash customers those days, but that would not be free. We're open for regular customers, and regular trash does cost to dispose of, because that's part of the message that we're trying to convey to people. This is a one-time only event, great day to clear out your back lot if you've got those things accumulated, but regular trash is something you need to be taking care of regularly. You should not pile it up, you should not wait for the free event, because there isn't one coming. So that's the basic message we're going to try to put out there. Customers will be allowed to dispose of bulky items, furniture, appliances, refrigerators, and tires for no charge during the event. So that's 9 to 1. And the idea is that if they're in line by 1 p.m., we will do everything we can to make sure that they get service, even if they don't actually get that service until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But the idea is if you're in line by 1 o'clock, you'll be able to participate in the event. So with that, I'd be open to any additional guidance you might want to offer or questions.
Anything from Anybody on the authority? No? Go. Has anybody joined us online, Kira? No? Okay. No public comment in this regard as well? Okay, let's move on to 6.2.
Okay.
Status report regarding.
And
Dublin
I'm
Solid
done with the
Waste.
PowerPoints now, Rachel. Status report. So you mentioned, why don't we pay down our debts, Chair Short? And what a good idea that is.
Well, yes.
So,
Oh,
so
yes.
what we've been
Yes, I
doing
did.
the last couple years is, you all may be aware of the GASB 75 requirements and the requirements related to other post-employment benefits. In an overview, many of the retirement programs for public agencies are generous, and some of those public agencies have not set aside the funds to pay those retirement benefits. And so recognizing this situation, the authority adopted a somewhat aggressive stand in trying to pay down those debts. And so for the last 3 years running, we've paid over $140,000 into those accounts. And the good news is that that has actually paid off. So by paying down those debts, where we are now in terms of the OPEB liability is that we are in a net positive position. So that means that we can pay as you go from this point, and that we're good. We don't have that huge OPEB liability looming on the books. So we'll be able to lower the payments in this year and subsequent years, but by paying that amount while we have the funds available, the agency's in a much better position.
And you got the clarification, I know last year when we had this discussion, you had some, concerns that your share of the OPED from the auditor's office. You got all that clarification through, okay,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you for asking. And essentially that, because we're paying down this extra amount and we're better than many agencies, we wanted to make sure that those funds that this agency had set aside were allocated specifically to this agency.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any other questions regarding our OPEB liability?
And considering that our legal counsel has not shown, I do not have any additional information for what was scheduled as the closed session, so I don't think there's anything to meet on that.
Well, then we will just forego our closed session item and possibly table that until next meeting. Okay. Any other comments from the board for the good of the order?
I wanted to bring up the bit about the abandoned vehicle abatement program. Looking at the Exhibit A, I noticed that in the first quarter, it was like $2,000 for towing, and then disposal and dismantling was almost $3,000. In the next quarter, it was almost $8,000 for towing and like less than $4,000 for dismantling. And then in the next one, it was even a bigger difference. And I'm curious why all of a sudden towing went up so high, whereas dismantling kind of maintained.
Those are good questions, and perhaps next meeting we can have an update from Dominic Mello on the AVA program, and we can address those.
You might warn him that I'm going to ask.
Gotcha.
I can only imagine that the difference would be because we're towing vehicles from further out in the county.
Could be,
And
yeah.
I believe we have a contract with a certain guy that does the dismantling, and so they all come to the same place.
Yeah.
So,
I assume
but-
dismantling stayed the same.
But it would be good to hear
Yeah,
from
just get a
Dominic on
report.
how those funds are
That's our
used.
job.
It's relatively small amount of money for as many vehicles are around
Yeah.
the county, for sure. Mr.
And a lot
Greeno?
of-
I will also say that during the summertime, we tend to get more traffic, so
Yeah.
it tends to
Bollox
towards,
up the
there's a
towing
possibility for more people leaving a vehicle along the side of the road.
Mm.
So, just my thought.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Ward, looks like we are done for this meeting. And I will adjourn this and until our next regularly scheduled meeting for October 18th right here at the Flynn Center. Thank you all for coming.